Is one of the best-known American authors. He wrote in the Gothic fiction style. Terror, love, or both terror combined with love were popular in his day. The Telltale Heart is one of his best-known short stories. Denise has really enjoyed choosing Poe for her reading. She hopes you might be able to continue enjoying your breakfast while learning. Here's the interpretive reader, Denise Ward.
The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, 1843. He was paid $10 for this to be published in the magazine called The Pioneer. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and earth, and in things in hell. How then is my visceral reaction that I am mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pure blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. He didn't suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. I could scarcely contain my feeling of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even dreaming of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped, and upon the tin fastener, the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise that I made, and he had turned in his bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." I resolved to open a very, very little crevice on the lantern. So I opened it until at length a simple, dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinction, all dull blue, and with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely on the damned spot. There came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch that makes sounds when it's enveloped in cotton. It was the beating of the old man's heart. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every second. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder every moment. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked only once. In an instant, I dragged him from the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. His eye would trouble me no more. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to observe, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had used a tub and caught it all. There came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bid the gentleman come in. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my officers all over the house. I told them, search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of the perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. But my head began to ache, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chanted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained in definition until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. The sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, a sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles, in a high pitch and with violent gesticulations. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, at this excited to fury by observation of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what can I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder. And still, the officers chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they not heard? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could take those hypercritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked, mock me no more. I admit the deed. Here are the planks. Here is the beating of the hideous heart. The end.